Well, good evening, one and all, and welcome to this meeting of the Community and Corporate Overview Scrutiny Committee. Just wait for a few people to finish shuffling chairs.
I'm sorted up already. Everything's built.
Item 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies or substitutions?
None received, Chair.
Okay. Next item is to approve as correct the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of May. Does anyone have any questions or issues to raise? If not, can someone move? And seconded. All in favour? Carried. I'll sign those during the meeting. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does any member have any interest to declare in any item on tonight's agenda? No. If it becomes apparent, please do so. Next item is a public question time, and I'm aware that we have one question that's been notified. I believe, Mr. Leeds, you're online? Oh, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Correct. I'm here. Can you hear me now?
I can now. Excellent.
Yeah.
Do you want to read your question, or are you happy for it to be taken as read?
No, I'd like to read it if possible,
go ahead.
because I've added a couple of little added bits to it. Curbside glass. Have the council considered putting glass in general recycling and sorting? The technology exists to do this, and lots of councils to do. In brackets, Bradford. This would save the cost of separate vehicles and boxes, but would require the investment of the plant. Look at YouTube to see what Bradford do.
Great. Thank you for the question. And you will have noticed that later on in the agenda, we have an update on some of the simpler recycling programme and what that looks like. So whilst this should be a short part of the question, you're more than welcome to stay for to listen to the more substantive section later on. So in answer to your question, firstly, should really reiterate that when you look at Wokingham compared to the rest of the country, the Wokingham Borough residents are doing a brilliant job already in recycling through taking it to bottle banks, taking it to RE3 facilities, with only a small proportion of glass currently being in general refuse. A number of other local authorities do collect glass with other mixed recyclables already, as you said, and whilst our current sorting facility cannot currently accept glass in its recycling streams, we are looking at options at that for the future. Do you have a supplementary?
I do have a supplementary, yes. I am not a great lover of recycling bags, and would like to purchase my own wheelie bin. I've watched the operation, and it would make little or no difference to the time involved, but would require the agreement of the contractor to run a dual service.
Again, thank you for the supplementary. When we looked at the answer, we really do appreciate the request and the time and the thought that's gone into it. But with many things, the contractor that we're using requires uniformity across the collection service. So the current approach can allow the operators to collect multiple households in one pass, and as such, containers will need to remain the same. We all have our own views of green bags and bins, and it's different to road by road and house by house. But for now, it has to be the one option that would fit all houses. We can't sort of chop and change between different houses or different types.
Yeah, I find that a little bit disappointing, because I think you could easily run a dual system, and I would just like the question to be put to the current contractor, Viola, and the incoming contractor, Biffa, because I've tried to contact them and they won't talk to me. They just refer me back to the council.
I understand your point. We actually have an update on, as I said, on simpler recycling later on in the agenda, and perhaps we can pick that comment up, or you can give some feedback on that comment on your update. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Needs. We shall move on. The next item is Town and Parish Council question time, which is first time I think it's been on the agenda, second time it's been on the agenda. Do we have any questions for town and parishes?
None received, Chair, and no councillor questions either.
Excellent. So in which case then we'll move on to one of two substantive items on the agenda this evening, which is an update on the preparation for our regulator of social housing inspection. Stephen, I think this is for you.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm just going to say a few words of introduction and then hand over to Francis, who's here online to talk on this item. I'm going to say in my introductory remarks what some of you at least will already know. The regulator for social housing oversees the activities of all registered providers of social housing in England. So that includes councils with their own housing stock in housing revenue accounts, as well as housing associations. And the regulator is going to be carrying out an inspection of our HRA within the next 2 years to ensure compliance with consumer standards. And those standards relate to safety, quality, and accountability. Now, I think we have a good story to tell, especially about the role of the Tenant and Landlord Improvement Panel, which is made up of our tenant volunteers, council officers in the housing service, and elected councillors of all the political groups on the council. And TLIP receives regular reports on housing policies and procedures and reviews and interrogates performance data. But obviously we want to be as prepared as we can be, and Francis will be able to tell you a lot more about what we have been doing and we plan to do to get ourselves in the best possible state of readiness for the regulator's inspection. So over to you, Francis.
That's great. Thank you, Stephen. Let me just share some slides that I've prepared. Okay. So just to kind of give you an update of where we're at in terms of getting ourselves ready for regulatory inspection. So as Stephen's mentioned, so the regulator for social housing has been strengthened to improve the quality and safety of social housing, ensuring that all tenants are treated fairly. So this is in response to things like the Grenfell Tower fire and the death of Awab Ishaq. And it's really to address those symptomatic issues of tenant neglect and inadequate housing conditions. So the overall aim is really to kind of build greater trust, transparency between landlords and tenants, ensuring that social housing provides safe, good quality homes and services. So as part of the strengthening of those powers, the regulator now actively monitors social landlords to ensure that they meet the required standards. So this includes things like conducting inspections and taking action against failing landlords. So as Stephen's mentioned, the Wokingham's HRA, which the majority of our social housing sits, is likely to be inspected in the next 2 years. So we've got a 4-year cycle of inspections going on, and they started 2 years ago. So the inspection will focus on our consumer standards, and this includes things like our safety and quality standard. So that's around the outcomes of the safety and quality of tenants' homes. There's a transparency, influence and accountability standard. So that looks at things such as how landlords provide information, how they listen to their tenants and act on their views. Then we've got a neighbourhood and community standard, which is the outcomes of how landlords work with other organisations to help ensure tenants live in safe neighbourhoods. And finally, a tenancy standard, which looks at how landlords allocate and let homes out and manage tenancies. So following an inspection, a regulatory judgment will be given, and that's dependent on how well the regulator judges the landlord has met those regulatory standards. So just looking at who's been regulated so far, the majority of judgments are kind of coming out at a C2 and C3. So I've just done a list of what the gradings are. So you've got C1, which is that overall the landlord's delivering the outcomes to the consumer standards, so delivering very well. C2, some weaknesses there. C3, you've got some serious failings. And then a C4, you've got very serious failings. So you've got those 4 judgments there that the regulator will come up with. So just to kind of give you an overview, so at the start of June, 35 local authorities have been inspected and received their regulatory judgment. So 3 local authorities so far have had a C1 regulatory judgment. That includes Barnsley, West Lancashire and City of Westminster Council. So in those ones, what the regulator said is that they were providing evidence and independent assurance of understanding their homes and of meeting landlord health and safety requirements. So right safety checks were being done, risk assessments being done correctly, and any necessary fixes were being made promptly. So at the other end of the scale for the C4s, so you've got 2 local authorities receiving a C4 judgment so far, and those include Newham and Castlepoint in Essex. So serious failings in mitigating fire safety risks for both of those ones. However, across all the kind of judgments, there were some common themes coming out, which we're kind of learning from. So common themes coming out: lack of evidence on stock conditions for all stock, gaps in relation to health and safety compliance, significant backlogs in repairs, number of homes not meeting decent home standards, a lack of proper process to assess and mitigate risks to tenants and homes where issues are outstanding, failures to establish proper tenant engagement structures and where tenants have got opportunities to scrutinise and influence decisions, and then issues with the collection of tenant satisfaction data. So a poor regulatory grading could significantly impact council finances through various mechanisms. So that includes things like increased compliance costs, potential fines, reputational damage, although none of the local authorities receiving regulatory judgments have been fined to date. And longer term, poor regulatory compliance could affect a council's ability to access certain funding streams or secure favourable loan terms. So we need to make sure that we're in a really good place for regulatory inspection, ensure we're data driven, have got strong compliance. We are aware that we've got certain gaps, such as having robust IT systems, but we are working to prepare a fully costed growth bid to address that. So we've had a housing improvement programme in operation for the past 18 months, and that's to really ensure that we're making continuous service improvements and identifying areas of risk. And we've also got a housing improvement board, which is chaired by Susan, and that's currently in operation. So in terms of the actions that we're undertaking to make sure that we're ready for this inspection, we've done a gap analysis looking at our consumer standards, so examining where we're performing well, not so well, and so on, benchmarking against other similar local authorities in terms of stock size. We're looking at delivery of compliance action plans to address key risk areas, so looking at things like property safety, tenant engagement, and ensuring that we're able to evidence that our homes are of a required standard. We've got that strengthened governance and reporting framework. So we've got the Housing Improvement Board, which we've just mentioned, chaired by Susan. We've got good reporting mechanisms already in place, as Stephen's mentioned, with the Council's Tenant and Landlord Improvement Panel. We're looking at enhanced data collection and assurance processes, so we can cross-reference that kind of data that we have. So, for example, knowing where tenants are vulnerable, knowing where properties might be awaiting repair, for example. So trying to kind of get all that data together. And it's crucial to ensure that we don't take data at face value. So we've got assurances that work is being carried out and standards are being met. So in terms of just preparing for the inspection itself, we're ensuring that our internal audit schedule is aligned with regulatory expectations. And we've done a critical friend exercise and self-assessments. They're currently underway and being carried out by Campbell Tickell. So that work is due for completion at the end of July. So just in terms of next steps then, so we're expecting that work carried out by Campbell Tickell to be delivered to us later in the month, after which we'll review those findings and develop an action plan. So that will include deadlines, milestones and accountabilities. A full report will be presented to this committee in October, and that will outline our current position based on that Campbell Tickell report and the other actions that we're undertaking. And this report will also include a suite of management information across the housing service. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Pauline.
I just would like to understand the scope. So this includes the HRA. Does it include all the houses that the housing companies own as well?
No, it would just be the HRA.
Why doesn't it include the housing companies?
I believe because the housing companies are registered as a separate registered provider, so they
Yeah.
will be audited in due course. So I imagine they'll be separate to the HRA.
Sorry, I was thinking it'd probably be more efficient to do them all together, but there we go.
Hmm.
And then the
We don't have any choice over that, I'm
no,
afraid.
I'm sure you don't, and nobody invites auditors. And the second question is: do we get to see the reports of other registered providers in our borough?
We do, so we can see their regulatory judgments. So, yes, we do because they're online. I'm just thinking of the neighbouring Berkshire authorities. We can see their regulatory judgment as well. So we've certainly been having a look at kind of Reading and Slough. So yes, we can.
So it'd be very no. I didn't mean. I meant other registered providers that are in our borough.
Yes, so all those RPs operating in our borough, we can look if they've been inspected, then those regulatory judgments are up on there online, so we can see those.
So it'd be useful to get some learning points from them as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm more worried about some of them than I am about you, but I might be wrong.
Caroline.
Just a couple of questions. When they come in and do their inspections, do we have a particular time scale that they will expect us to do any work?
The timescale that we get, so we get a 6 weeks notice, and then I believe they would be interviewing for about a 2-day period. So I imagine when we get that kind of 6 weeks notice, they will give us an outline of what they're going to come in and do and when. Thank
you. Second one is, we've got one underway, I know this preliminary one. Have we got any items that have come up early or nothing as yet? Nothing is, is that the Campbell to Cal work you're referring to? Yeah, we haven't had anything as yet, and that's still underway. So we'll be expecting that report later in the month. So we'll certainly kind of share the findings of that in the October report. Okay, thank you. It's just when I was audited, they'd give you a few heads up on a few things. So that sounds positive. Thank you. Okay.
Mary-Louise.
Yes, thank you. Because as you know, I can't get enough of this stuff. I was very surprised to see that Wandsworth, which I'd always seen as sort of, a borough that did really quite well in social housing, got a C3. And there was an extremely entertaining, if you like that sort of thing, oversight and scrutiny meeting when they discussed it. And one of the issues came through around the nature of the data, which you've also talked about, and about the problems of sampling and the sampling not giving you an actual genuine, reliable information. But also, it was a lively oversight and scrutiny meeting, shall we say, and there was quite a lot of talking about the sort of like the complacency that the Wandsworth Council had fallen into, that they had structures and they believed those structures worked, and they found it quite a it's obviously been a very challenging process for them. So I think it's worth pursuing anything that does come up from the review, particularly around this issue of data. I think for Wandsworth, obviously fire regulation is key, and but it's also a thing about taking, one of the things that came up again and again was the sort of not taking responsibility for things. But yeah, it's just worth thinking about, our peers, if you like, and because it's been quite surprising who has, so not just like geographically, but people who, have a similar level of perhaps, funding, prosperity, structure, and so on. Yeah, and just to kind of add to that, so when we're looking at our data, we are going to benchmark against other similar organisations who've got kind of similar stock size. So yeah, that'll be interesting when we've carried out that benchmarking as well.
Any more for any more? No? Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for the update. I think we're seeing this back in October, so we should look forward to that. Right, moving onwards.
If we get it back, could we see any learning points you've picked up from other registered providers in the borough as well, just out of interest.
Yeah, we can add that in.
Yeah, that's a good shout. We should use all of the available. Welcome to our new exec member.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
We'll try and be gentle.
Oh.
We'll try, yeah, try and, give you not too much of a rough ride, but it'll be rough. It'll be probing questions. Right.
Excellent.
So I hope you're prepared. This is, combative arena. But welcome. And,
I am, more importantly, I'm sure Richard and Pam are absolutely prepared.
You've got two excellent officers behind you. So
Absolutely.
So this item, agenda item 20, is the simpler recycling update, specifically looking at curbside glass collection. Over to you.
Absolutely. So very briefly introduce and then hand over to Pam and Richard. So as you've all seen, I'm sure the report outlines how we can implement a glass collection for the borough, and which we know would be welcomed by residents, and it's something that I think many people have hoped to see for a while. But the report also highlights how well we're doing, really our residents are doing in recycling already. We achieved a fantastic 58% overall recycling rate last year, and for glass that's as high as 84%. And I looked up the national average for glass is currently 75%. So despite not having a curbside glass collection, we are already well above the national average for that. You'll have seen it's in the context of the national government's simpler recycling legislation, which absolutely totally on board with the ambition, but really in preparing this, coming to grips with what those challenges and variation is on a local level, particularly in our case with the RE3 partnership as it runs. So given these, the value for money challenges to bring this in, we'll here to outline what's going on, but also really welcome the feedback and inputs from the committee to take it forward. So Richard, Pam, not sure who I'm handing over to, but take it away.
Great, thanks Councillor Harding. Hopefully everyone can see the screen okay. Yep, the presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect, okay, hope everyone's all okay. I'll be taking you through the first section in terms of simpler recycling, and Pam will take you through the second section, all things 2026 waste collection and street cleansing update. So in terms of simpler recycling, it will be part of the Environment Act 2021. Its main ambition is to standardise and simplify recycling collections across England. So if you live in Cornwall, Essex, Berkshire, Northumberland, all local authorities and businesses will be required to collect plastics, glass, metal, paper, card and food waste. So in terms of key dates for the delivery of this simpler recycling legislation, there are four key milestones. So businesses over 10 employees already collecting those materials from April this year. Local authorities from next year will collect those materials in April. Any businesses under 10 employees have to collect those materials from April 2027, and also in April 2027 all local authorities will be required to collect flexible plastics. So in terms of the additional recycling materials to be collected for us as a borough, we can't collect everything apart from glass. Now, as Councillor Harding's already suggested, we have a really good network of bring banks across the borough. They're very well used. Our residents are doing an amazing job in terms of recycling generally, but also recycling glass. So 3,200 tonnes of glass was collected last year through our bottle banks. We know about 3% of the glass is still in the refuse, and that equates to about 600 tonnes through the latest composition analysis, waste composition analysis in May. Through curbside collection, we expect to collect around about 440 tonnes of that 600 tonnes when implemented. In terms of the beneficial outcomes, we know that the increase of 440 tonnes will help our recycling rate. We estimate it's around about 0.5% added to the 58% already mentioned. It's certainly more convenient than for residents putting their glass out the curbside rather than going to bottle banks. It ensures our compliance with legislation, and it also meets two key policies. So one is the emerging council plan through the key greener theme, and that is increasing our recycling overall. And the other one is through the community visions aim of making it easy for people to access the things they want and need. So how much is it going to cost, and what is the assessment for value for money? Our current bottle bank service costs around £50,000 a year. So that is the collection of the bottle banks, its maintenance of the bottle banks, staffing, fuel for the vehicle. In terms of new collection service, it's significantly different. So each year there will be a revenue of a cost of £710,000 plus inflation each year. And that is for staff and the vehicle running costs. There will also be a one-off capital cost in the region of £1.5 million, the new vehicles, the containers and distribution of the containers, as well as the communications to residents as well. And I already mentioned the additional to recycling rate is around about 0.5%. So let's have a look a little bit more in terms of our current service and the future costs through a curbside collection service. So the top line there you can see is bottle banks, £50,000, and the future costs is we're looking like £5,000 nominal estimate. Now we've put £5,000 in there because we expect the majority of our bottle banks to be removed because it's inefficient having two services running together. Now those bottle banks will probably be in strategic locations, yet to be decided. In terms of future cost as well, mentioned already 710,000. That amounts to £715,000. That's 5,000 plus 710. However, we do have a saving around about 440 tonnes of the additional glass not going to energy from waste. So that's £30,000 saving, which takes it down to £685,000 per annum as compared to £50,000 per annum for the network of bottle banks as we currently undertake and are certainly well used. Looking at other local authorities, especially in our RE3 Cardra, so that's Bracknell Forest and Reading, and our partnership with those. We have got about 3% across the board in terms of the amount of glass in the waste stream. Our associated capture rate, which is the weight of collected glass divided by the weight of total available glass times 100 is 84%, so it's really, really high. Bracknell's is very similar to ours and Reading slightly behind. Estimated collected additional tonnages, Bracknell and ourselves and working are very similar and looking like about 700 tonnes additional for Reading to be captured, and 0.5% for us and 1% additional recycling rate for Bracknell and Reading. That's the estimate in terms of the additional there. So what I'll do is just pass over to part 2 with Pam. We'll take you through 2026 and we'll go for questions after that.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, lovely to...
Can I just double check? Is this easier to take all? Because I feel we're going. I presume we're going to get a lot more questions about the glass. Would you want to take this, and then or hear the whole lot, and then do questions on the whole lot in one go? Yeah, I think I would as well. Can we break this into 2 parts? Because I think there'll be more.
Yeah, of course.
And do the glass collection first. I've got a slew of questions on this, as I'm sure other people have got as well. Firstly, I'm an advocate of trying to simplify our recycling and make it easier for residents everywhere to recycle. We should be removing any barriers to doing this. I'd like to understand, because I know that a big element of big part of the problem of this is the facility, the RE3 facility in Reading as part of the RE3 agreement. I kind of like to understand I'm coming at this kind of in a backwards way, because part of me is going, if that contract's only got a couple of years left, I know this is legislation, but if you were looking at this from any other lens, in any other planet, you'd be going, it's costing us £15 a tonne to collect glass through a glass bank, and we're going to be proposing to comply with legislation to have to fork out 685,000 a year extra, plus the initial capital outlay for all the new vehicles, just to increase our recycling rate by 0.5%. I know this is legislative, so there's bugger all we can do about it, but this is poor legislation that's going to lead to some ridiculously hard decisions for every council. I know there's only 30 of us that don't really do curbside. So from my perspective, and a lot of my questions, I think a lot of other questions around the room will probably be about the same thing, but we're spending £15 a tonne to collect curbside, to glass from a recycling bank. This would be, I presume, a monthly collection, but I presume that's going to come onto it later on. This is going to add 0.5 to our overall recycling rate, but it's going to cost us 685,000 to get there. You know, so a couple of my questions is, one, RE3, what's the future? How does this evolve with that? Two, when we start looking at residents in the eye, when we start talking about budgets later this year and go, we're going to have to spend 685,000 to do this, which I say is lucky because it's less than Bracknell Forest is having to spend, which is probably closer to 2 million, I think, if you believe their paperwork they put out, because they're going with wheelie bins. I'm incredulous. I'd like to understand what Reading's doing, because obviously the three of us are all RE3 together. But for me, I'm just staggered that this is £685,000 a year that we're going to have to force to find from somewhere to fund a glass collection service from the curbside for a monthly collection, versus a £50,000 cost right now, which is going to lead to some really hard decisions. I should say this isn't personal or anything else towards officers who are having to give us this update tonight. This is a really hard topic, and I'm really grateful for all the work you've done on the collection contract, but I'm slightly staggered that this is going to cost this much money for such tiny benefits and such massive disproportionate cost to all residents, as we're going to have to find this capital and revenue ongoing. So I think in that, my questions are about RE3 and what we do with that, or what is going to happen with that. Yeah. DEFRA and questions around, you know, what happens when councils suddenly start going, well, we don't have this. Are we getting any transitional funding from government to support us with the cost of machinery, increased collection? I think the answer probably is going to be no, or very little, or allocated on current means. I'm going to have more, but I'm sure other people will have other questions. Sorry, that's a really rambling, long question, but I'm incredulous with how much this is going to cost for such little uplift. Sorry. Do you want to add to that? If anybody wants to add to that, so on something I haven't mentioned, and then
I completely agree with you, Mark. This is completely barking. If they'd actually set the legislation in terms of setting us a target for back glass recycling, we could have improved glass recycling at a fraction of the cost by dealing with the problem rather than replacing the solution that works with something else that may not work any better. So my worry also is that, do we understand why people don't recycle glass? My suspicion, and I might be wrong, is that a lot of them are elderly and can't get to the glass banks. So how are they going to get a box full of glass to the edge of the drive? I think you might end up with the same problem. So I'm concerned that it might actually make the recycling worse, or at least not a great deal better, and it's going to cost us a bloody fortune because somebody's done the thing that the regulators quite often do, which is try and define how you do it rather than what you should be doing and let you decide how. It's crazy. So my question is, what happens if we don't do it?
Mary-Louise, do you have a...
Yes, no, completely. Sorry, some anxiety, particularly from older residents, about the sort of the phasing out of bottle banks, and that's around a monthly collection, because like a month, particularly if you live in a smaller residence, right, is a long time to hoard glass, yeah. And there, you know, there is a risk that our recycling rate will actually go down because people put it in the general waste simply to get rid of it, yeah. And so the sort of automatic sort of phasing out of the bottle banks because we've now got this system, which we have to have, I think needs to be looked at, or could be looked at again, because you know, there is anxiety about the holding on to the glass. There's also anxiety, particularly people in the new builds, where there isn't actually that much space for storage. And we're now talking about having, you know, recycling bags, which, you know, expand, get bigger and bigger, and your wheelie bin, and now some kind of container for glass. And, you know, I haven't dared talk to residents yet about the soft plastic one, which will also coming, when presumably we're also going to be asking people to hold on to their soft plastic for a month, yeah? So we're talking about massive storage issues in houses which are getting smaller and smaller. So, yeah.
Can I just add one more thing to that, which is, I thought there was some regulation about the amount of containers you were allowed, i.e. the number coming. So I just wondered if there was any information on, information on that and what's coming on that. And also, another question which you've just sparked in my mind is, if we kept the bottle banks and therefore the curbside glass was only the people who didn't use the bottle banks, would it reduce the cost of the curbside glass, or is it the collection cost that's the issue?
Yeah, I think it's the collection cost. That's the thing. But my concern is that if people are resistant to holding on to glass for a month, yeah, and you know, also because we live in a society having the amount of glass that they have, like on public display, as it were, people are going to put it in the general waste to get rid of it. And if we get rid of the bottle, I mean, so at the very least there should be some kind of phased reduction. But if you get rid of the bottle banks on day one or soon after, you are going to have mass unhappiness. And I think the response will be, I'm going to chuck it in the regular bin.
So I've got questions on what happens if we don't. Questions around bottle banks, how many are they all being removed? How are they being removed? What's the phasing, etc.? What percentage? Updates on RE3 and what that means long, short, medium term. I think mine also, what happens if we don't? Yeah. And not just the elderly, but those that need...
Assisted collection.
Assisted collection, thank you. I think that's probably the bulk of the questions so far. Apologies if I've missed any. Oh, I'm sorry, Catherine.
Well, yeah, I agree entirely with Pauline that it's barking. And I agree, I've had the same things as Marie-Louise about storage and ability. But I just wanted to ask a couple of statistics sort of questions. I don't fully understand what the 3% is. Is that 3%, is that in my rubbish, 3% of it is glass? Right. And how do you estimate how much glass isn't being, you know, this unknown glass quantity? I'm just curious, really, about how that's estimated.
So there's a lot of sampling that takes place. I'll just answer very briefly in the room. So of the rubbish that goes through the RE3 centre, there's a huge amount of sampling. So we get a lot of data on the compositional analysis. So that's how we know how much glass is is currently in the residual waste.
I think Catherine may have been referring to fly tipping and things like that.
A lot of fly tipping is glass bottles, to be fair. I mean, as a litter picker, I know that. I mean, just minor fly tipping.
Should we go on one last one?
One last, and it's my fault for not remembering. Is the packaging levy, the supermarket packaging levy, going to be put towards this? It's just a question.
Okay.
Sorry, can I ask a general one?
Caroline's got a general question, and then I'm going to stop. So I'm going to let Pam and Richard try and.
Mine's just the councils have been doing this for some time. Do you know what their recycling rates are? That's what I thought, yeah. I know, that's what I can't understand. Thank you.
I will just say we spent a lot of time down in Chichester and they have commingled. They don't have food waste, although that's coming next year apparently, but their recycling rates with commingled is less than ours without glass. I think a lot of councils are like that. Right.
Pam and Richard, you two take it away. I'll.
Floor is yours if you manage to get all of that. And if you miss any, then, or if we need clarification, just ask.
Yeah, I think if it's all right with Richard, I'll kick off with a couple of perhaps the ones I felt that came out as the biggest priorities, and then if we start with those, and then we'll kind of hopefully funnel our way through to the others. So the what happens if we don't do it question is a very interesting one. We are currently doing a lot of research around that. The legislation clearly states that it is a statutory requirement, and that is clear. There is some very recent information that's come out from DEFRA with regard to potential action in the event that the council chooses not to do it. Certainly our approach to this is we want to do this, but we want to also explore all of the financial implications and our full understanding of what the process is in order to make the right decision going forward. So I think, fully supported by yourselves, of course, but I think that's very much where we're coming from with this. So we haven't quite finished all of that exploration. And that includes a meeting that we're waiting to be held with DEFRA, where we can have some very specific conversations and ask some questions about the key issues that we have, most of which you've actually raised just now. So that will be a good opportunity for us to explore and sound out some of those. I think the reason why we want to do that is because my belief is that of the 30 or so councils you referred to, Mark, I think we are probably the best current performing in glass recycling. And therefore, I feel quite strongly that we're in the best position to have that conversation with DEFRA and give the very strong examples we have of the situation. So I think hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of to sort of what happens if we don't. Unfortunately, it's not a straight answer because we don't know for sure, but we know there have been some suggestions. There have been suggestions of withholding some of the EPR funding, the producer responsibility funding that comes out. There's been suggestions that DEFRA have the right to hold a judicial review of the council. So there's a number of legal aspects to this which we will be fully exploring to make sure we understand all of the issues and how we need to deliver this in a very cohesive way. So happy to take any further questions on that before I move on to the next question.
How much EPR funding were you actually going to get? And is it anywhere near the cost?
So the EPR funding, we won't be informed about this year until October for this year. So we haven't yet been told what that is. We've been told the amount will change every year. And so we cannot rely on it being the same figure. And so it is based on primarily a number of averages across the UK. That's how DEFRA have calculated it. So even when we get it, we may not feel that it represents what we think we should get. There is an appeals process with that. So our intention is to gather all of the data on the funding and then present that back. But I think I'm just going to hand over to Stephen on that comment as well.
Thank you, Pam. I don't think there's a lot I want to add other than just saying this year we got a sum of money for this, the extended producer responsibility. That was a payment made specifically to help us. From next year and the following 2 years, it'll be part of the core revenue support that the council receives. It'll be rolled into that core revenue support and subject to the same assessment of need based on deprivation that the government is now placing a great deal of emphasis on. So we can anticipate that that money will diminish. And can I just finish the point, Pauline, and then very happy to hear Art. 2.4 million before this year, but it will go down significantly, we anticipate. And there is also something worth saying about a tax on behaviour. If it works, it changes behaviour. So we could imagine that there will be a diminution in the amount of money coming in through that route anyway, even leaving aside the fact that this money will be rolled into our core revenue support, and therefore we can anticipate significantly less in the years to come. So we need to be aware that the sum of money we got this year will almost certainly not be repeated.
Keep going.
Sorry, is it also
sorry.
just
no,
worth...
no. Pam, Richard, keep going.
Okay, right, thank you. So, Richard, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to add something to that. So within all the materials that need to be collected, food waste is one of those. So we collect food waste, but a lot of other councils don't. There is something called the new burdens funding, which those councils will be receiving for food waste, and that is mainly around capital, so vehicles and equipment and containers. However, we understand that that will not be available for anybody with glass.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. That's very helpful. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. So there was a question then around the RE3, the future processes and how that's working. So we've got around 6.5 years left of the current contract, which expires in 2031 for disposal. And one of the options that we looked at to see if it was viable was to look at whether we could commingle the glass. But unfortunately, the excessive cost of the changes that would be required for the RE3 site meant that that just was even further out of our price range than this current option that we're looking at now. So, however, going forward, we are clearly going to look at a new strategy and a new approach. We start with a blank page for that new contract from 2031, and we very much encourage any views to be put on the table for that and for that sort of vision piece to start looking at what the contract could do going forward, and that could include any number of the things that we've been discussing today. So that is being considered, even though it sounds very early to be talking about re-procurement of a new contract 6 years ahead. That is very much in our minds at the moment, and we're starting to think about that.
Can I just ask, and it's not a question, but it's just in your future conversations you're having with DEFRA, given that we've got what was one of the leading PFI contracts for waste disposal of its type 25 years ago, 20-something years ago, and that's imminently coming up for renewal, 6 years. But that means if the renewal comes up in 6 years, it will be a couple of years beyond that, or a year or so beyond that, you'd see any new equipment, unless it's funded forward. In the conversations with DEFRA, given how much this is going to cost, can we ask the question, given the disproportionate amount of cost, plus we don't know what the 3-year settlement's going to look like, and I can't imagine that's going to be good, can we delay until the new contract kicks in for disposal as an option, as we're already collecting?
That is, yeah, absolutely. And when I mentioned earlier about exploring all the options, that is on that list of options. So thank you. Yeah, it's we don't want at this stage. We feel certainly as an officer, I would feel I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't put all of the different options on the table and ask for a response based on all of those alternatives, because that's what we're trying to do in doing our duty, is to try and find the best solution for this. And I think we should leave no stone unturned in that respect, and that includes the one you just described. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Apologies for interrupting.
No, it's absolutely fine. You mentioned about wanting to know what Reading is doing. They are actually proposing to do fortnightly collections of glass. Hence, their costs will be quite a bit higher than the ones that we have been quoting ourselves. So that's for background information. They have their own views on why they think that is the right option for them. And I think are they going for bins, Richard? I can't remember. I think they may be going with wheelie bins or boxes.
I think they might be going with boxes. I think they might be going with boxes.
Yeah. I think so. Bracknell are going with wheelie bins, aren't they?
Yeah.
And then Reading are going for boxes, but Reading have opted for a fortnightly collection. But just to say that is, as you would probably guess, is significantly more expensive as an option. And then moving down the list, really helpful to get the feedback. Thank you about the fact that a month is a long time to hoard, as someone referred to the glass, and putting it places. And actually, if we're not careful, there is a risk that actually our recycling rate could get worse and not better, because someone having to find a place to store that. And if people are finding it difficult to move and various other factors, yes, we absolutely do have assisted collection. And very much we would want to support people in their endeavours to recycle. So we would probably see quite an increase in that to help people. But I think that is there are very valid points again, which we would helpfully I would then add to my list of things to discuss with DEFRA. So again, I think that's a helpful conversation.
Pauline.
I think as well as your risk of increased assisted collection, I think you've got to recognise that, I don't know about anybody else around here, but I'd find it difficult to lift a month's worth of glass bottles from my house, and there ain't anybody else to lift it. Now, exactly. That's a lot of glass, and it's very heavy. So
I'll second that. I can't lift one of those.
To be honest,
I can't lift one of those old black boxes that's
full of glass. No, I couldn't either.
Lift it. No.
And it will be after a month.
I must admit, in my own.
I'm trying to keep this professional, and jam jars, obviously.
Lots of very heavy jam jars, yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say my own experience.
Coffee, Nescafe.
Though from a storage perspective, and obviously it will vary and there are different size properties, from observing my household, my neighbours, all the people I cycle past at the Charleville Bottle Bank, a lot of people are still storing their glass in those old boxes. So, in terms of, I guess, obviously there'll be some households who empty them more often than once a month. There'll be some who empty them every 2 months, and that's what I think one of the challenges with introducing, obviously we have to do a very standardised collection, is that it's less flexible to adapt to each individual household.
I think one thing we can all agree on is that this was a bad piece of legislation.
Catherine.
Well, I've got a sort of devil's advocate question, which is maybe a temporary thing, that people are aware of this legislation, and is there a danger that having, carefully gone to the bottle bank, diligently gone to the bottle banks for years and years and years and got up to this huge level of recycling, if we now suddenly say, oh, by the way, you've got to go on doing that, there might be a bit of a sort of drop in, can't be bothered anymore, because we were sort of hanging on until they did curbside recycling. I mean, I realise this is kind of more of a temporary thing, but could be a problem.
I suspect, and we may well hear from some residents, and I think that's great to kind of get that feedback. For some people, the current system works well. They're used to it. I go to the supermarket. If I need to, I take my bottles to the bottle bank, and it has that flexibility of, if people don't have the space, you can literally drop one or two in and you know where they are. And obviously we're able to operate a really comprehensive network of bottle banks at the moment at very efficient costs. And also, as I'm sure we'll have many more conversations over the coming months around, this is about where we choose or have to spend the resources that we do have, and that's going to be a real conversation and challenge for all of us, I suspect. So But absolutely, I think people have been very understandably looking to have a glass curbside collection for some time. I think now what we're realising is the realities of bringing that in at a point in time when we have this sort of 6.5 years left on the current disposal, and that integration or non-integration between the collection and disposal timings to do this in perhaps a more coherent way.
Pauline.
Two questions. Firstly, if you're going to keep some bottle banks, you're going to keep the ones at Re3 so that people can actually drop their glass off directly there, so they don't have to carry it down a half-mile drive in order to leave it at the end of the drive once a month, or indeed store it around the house. And then the second question is, what's the actual legal definition of curbside? Is there any wiggle room there?
Yeah, I think we'll have to come back to you in terms of Re3. It's a good suggestion, Pauline, in terms of bottle banks remaining in that position. In terms of curbside, yeah, I don't think there's much wiggle room there, because curbside is basically the edge of your property, so it can't be halfway up your property or near your front door. In which case, if you can't move the glass down, if you've got a disability, infirm, etc., then that will be an assisted collection, and it's likely to increase the assisted collection costs as well.
Sorry, Richard, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking as to whether a bottle bank at the end of the estate would count as curbside, and therefore you didn't have to collect from every drive.
It wouldn't, unfortunately. No, not in the eyes of the legislation.
But in terms of the RE3, I mean, given that those facilities are where the collections would go to, I'm sure they will remain. And to reassure Marie-Louise, I mean, the intent is absolutely not to pull them all on day one. I think, we can... we want to be as efficient as possible, and maintaining the full network, if we have to bring in this curbside, isn't going to be as efficient, but at least we will have data in terms of like how often they're being emptied as it is, which are the most heavily used, and so on, and be able to do it in a phased way.
I think there's just a couple of things, whilst I think we might have got everything off this one, that I think it's fairly clear the views are pretty uniform in our concern. I think as this is a public meeting, and obviously this is going through into the exec programme and other activity, I think it's really critical that the messaging that people see and hear from this, that we talk about, is very clear, that this is not a done deal, that we're not signing off spending vast amounts of money, and both capital and revenue, that we are not scrapping all of the recycling bottle banks on day one. I just think there's a real need that we're all really clear about this in how we talk to people and comms, just to make sure that people don't see this and go, glass recycling is coming. Just to reinforce.
We've discussed a lot of the challenges involved in making this move to comply with legislative requirements. What we haven't really talked about explicitly is what kind of challenges the council may well face as a result of the 3-year financial settlement. It may well be that Reading is anticipating doing well out of that settlement. I think we can reasonably anticipate not doing so well. So I think that is going to be part of the landscape that needs to be taken into account when a final decision is made about this. It's inevitably going to be important, because we are quite possibly going to have very significant savings to make overall in our budgets. We don't yet know. It's too early to tell, but clearly the government is placing much greater emphasis on indices of deprivation in the distribution of its core revenue support. And we lost £1 million of core revenue support this year. It's reasonable to assume that over that 3-year period we're going to lose some more. So I think we really need to know what that financial landscape is, as well as try to address all of these complex problems about the achievability of what's being asked of us. So I think you're absolutely right. This remains an area where we've got to do a lot of work, a lot of investigating, a lot of assessing of the evidence before we can reach a balanced decision.
Thank you. Dave?
Is there a minimum prescribed sort of regularity of the collection having to happen? Because we've talked about fortnightly, monthly. Is there a minimum frequency?
No, and that's an interesting question. So we are aware, for example, of one council that's decided to go 6 weekly with glass collection. So there is currently no set prescribed frequency by the government.
So why don't we just do it once every 4 years then?
Annually.
And leave the bottle banks.
Well,
I like your thinking.
I think there was a question on the 3% as well, around, you know, where is that? So it is through the waste composition analysis, which is statistically relevant. It showed that 3% of an average black bin on a sample that was selected was glass. Hopefully that clears that one up.
Thanks, Richard.
I think Dave was making a comment to go, could we make it once every 4 years?
Yes, as in...
I think it was more of a frequency collection rather than an amount collection. But I think if it's 4
yeah,
years
it was the frequency basically. Could we do the frequency of the collection once every 4 years? And obviously that would reduce our costs, or annually, yeah.
Christmas perhaps.
And leave the bottle banks there.
One to come back on. Mary-Louise, and then we're going to move this forward.
Yes, I was just asking about the soft plastic, which will come on. Are we looking at like a similar outlay for that? And I mean, and in terms of storage as well. I mean, I grew up in a country where we have 6 bins. It doesn't worry me, but I mean, residents here have, you know, concerns and also a lot of interest. I mean, soft plastic is one of those where you do see a massive improvement in the amount of waste that you dispose of. It's actually a much easier sell than others. It's kind of a pity that we can't do it the other way around, because soft plastic is but is it going to cost, are we going to have, you know, similar capital costs for soft plastic?
No, so the analysis we've done with the contractors shows that from a collection perspective, they're not expecting to see any additional cost. And that is based on the trials that have been done by RE3 colleagues using some pre-purchased bags where the flexible plastics can then be put into. Also, if you look at how much space they take up as well, those flexible plastics take up volume-wise a very small percentage of that waste area as well. So when you consider both those things, it's a very different beast, and the costs attached would be significantly less. There would be processing costs at the other end, disposal costs, and we're still waiting to understand what those are. So we're doing some work on that to find out more detail. But on the collection side, our new contractor, BIFA, has already informed us that there would be likely no additional collection cost.
Absolutely. So that's actually quite a quick win, isn't it? To go in if we want to promote. I mean, it does require quite a lot of education, because, you know, the definition of soft plastic, the scrunch test and so on, you know, takes quite a lot of time. I mean, there are costs involved, but it is sort of, it's one of the things that you could actually see a massive improvement in the volume of your rubbish and in, you know, your contribution to the common weal. Maybe we could, you know, bring that up.
Pauline, and then I'll move this on. Oh, Katrine, do you want to come back?
Yeah, it was on soft plastics. I think the one thing about that, Mary-Louise, is plastic bags weigh next to nothing. So I'm not quite sure how much collecting plastic bags is going to add to our recycling percentage, because they don't weigh anything much. I don't know if you've got a figure for that.
Don't know if you have it to hand, Richard. I have seen it. It's significantly more than 0.5%. So I think that's, it is. And again, it comes back to that educational piece of, pardon?
Sorry, based on what? I mean,
the compositional analysis of what's left in the black bin.
Is that by volume or by weight?
By weight.
By weight.
Really? Yeah, there's quite a lot in
incredible.
there. And I think, as Pam alluded to, the key cost that we do need to, it is going to be more on the disposal end. So currently there are very few plants which can actually process this, and obviously there's going to be a lot more materials. It's great that the material recycling facility has got through the Flex Collect trial that some households in Reading and Bracknell have been carried out. Have been practicing, but that's not to say it's totally straightforward to go from that to scaling up to every single household. So there'll be a report from RE3 in September to give us a lot more information about that trial that we can bring in, but definitely much better news on the collection side, and anticipating that it, in terms of results and benefits, there's more wins to be gained there.
And it's in terms of what the packaging levy is for, it seems much more valuable in the long term in terms of getting rid of landfill than spending money to do what we already do quite well, 0.5% better.
You could spend a little tiny bit of money and increase the percentage of glass recycling without changing everybody's system, just changing it for some people. And then you'd benefit the people who can't use the current scheme and not lose the bring banks.
Okay, I'm going to move us on to that, but plenty for you to take away, consider, ruminate, discuss. Just to wrap this up, I know we've got the, as just been mentioned, the soft plastics report coming back through to us later this year. What's the process from here on this item on glass collection in terms of future timescales? You can come back, but is it this year, early next year? When are we going to see the next evolution in thinking? And you can.
Yeah, I was going to say, Pam, do come in with any more specifics. I guess from my expectation, the key things that we are waiting on or working through, lots of these discussions with DEFRA, and of course the more clarity on the financial position as well. So my anticipation is that it would be in the autumn.
Great, thank you. Pam, should we move on to the second update, which I think is on the waste collection contract as opposed to the disposal contract?
That's it, waste collection, street cleansing. Yes, thank you. I'll just ask Richard to reshare the slides. So you'll know that the waste procurement took place and BIFA were awarded the waste collection and street cleansing contract. So I just wanted to give you a brief update to let you know where we are, and certainly to reassure you we haven't forgotten it. We're doing work in earnest now on the mobilisation. We would like to come back quarterly, if that suits the committee, to come back and give you regular updates so that we can let you know how things are going and what progress is being made. Thank you, Richard. So we've met face-to-face with BIFA and their mobilisation team. They're really, really keen to get started on this. We've had a couple of meetings since then. And as you know, the new contract starts on the 1st of June. We have got subgroups set up, we've got governance set up, so really are getting everything underway now, and it's a really exciting time and a project to be part of as well. So that's all going according to plan. And just a note at the end of this slide really is from ourselves as officers, but just generally, I know we've got another year to go, but thanks to Veolia and FCC as contractors, particularly just Veolia because they've been with us a lot longer, for delivering the quality of service that they have for us. So that's a big mention to them really, and a recognition of what they've done, and for FCC and the service on street cleansing as well. So an acknowledgement on both of those. Thank you, Richard. And we just wanted to run through a couple of things. We've talked before about what are the benefits for things, so we just wanted to cover a couple here. Some of the things that we haven't had or that we're getting a greater benefit from: social value reporting. That will be much more detailed and we'll be able to break that down really well. We'll have some increased reduction of the carbon, and we'll also be able to have some really good data on that, showing how that's been arrived at. BIFA run a national control centre, and that allows them to observe behaviours of their crew, which they then reward or put in performance processes, and that has proven and data backs that up to show how much improvement that makes on people's behaviours and delivery of the service, which is really good news for us. And that aligns with their focus on right first time. Also on the garden sacks, currently, so if some of you use the service or you're aware of your residents who do, you currently just have to put those out and hope that the crew that goes past notices it to pick it up. In future, you'll be able to just go online and book that, or you can call up and book it. And that makes sure that on the in-cab device that the crews have, it will pop up straight away to tell them that that address has a garden waste sack waiting to be collected. So that will be a nice, much more reliable service than some residents get at the moment with that. And then the in-cab reporting I've just mentioned, that really just allows the crews and therefore our customer service team to have real-time live updates on everything that's happening in the street as it's finished, and that just gives a much better service for residents as well, which we're really excited about having, and I know the customer services team are really keen to get going with that as well. We also have a number of electric small vehicles. I think there's 5 or 6 in the bid that will be coming through, so we're excited about having those. And also we have a new electric street cleansing machine, which also has jet washing equipment attached to it, which again will be new for us, and extra facilities which will allow us to just do a lot more when it comes to cleansing and maintaining street furniture and things like that, which would have been much more difficult for us to do currently. So yeah, some good things there that we can look forward to in the future. Thank you, Richard. Bit of a whistle-stop tour there for you, but we just wanted to let you know that things are up and running, let you know about all the good stuff that's on the way, and happy to take any questions on that.
Thanks, Pam. Pauline.
How about weeding of gutters? We've still got problems with foot-high weeds in gutters. I don't know if anybody else does. Maybe it's just early. But how frequently is it going to be done? Is the street cleaner actually going to do it, or is it going to have to be a separate weed-killing effort?
It's still going to be on the 7-week schedule, Pauline, and weed spraying will be twice a year, as it is now. That will be mechanically swept every 7 weeks.
So will the mechanical sweeper take the weeds out of the gutter?
Yes, it should do, Pauline. Yes. If you're talking about the channel, so you've got the pavement there, you've got the road there, and you've got the bit along between the pavement and the road, yes, they will.
It doesn't seem to at the moment. Is there something... Okay. My feeling is that they're not as close to the edge as the weeds are. I just don't know. Right. Is there anything that ensures they're right in? Yeah, so they are left-hand drive. They are skilled operators in terms of what they undertake. But what I would like to do, Pauline, is get one of the team to come out and have a look with you in terms of where these issues are, and then we can address them. To be fair, Richard, I've seen it worse than it is at the moment, but it's still, because sometimes they're up here, but it's still there, and I mean, it might be the dry weather, it might be improved cleaning, I don't know which, but it's still not dealing with it, I don't think. Do you think so, Caroline? You seen? We've got better weeds. You got more stronger weeds in early. You think so? Yeah. Well, where I am, because I clear them out. Yeah. But you clear them out. Yeah.
Okay. Happy to undertake that, Pauline, with one of the team to go out and have a look and just understand what's going on and where, and then we can address it with the contractor.
I'll send you some photographs.
Lovely. Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions on this item? I suspect we'll get a lot more updates over time as the mobilisation goes through. And I think in answer to your question about when do you want to come back, I think quarterly is fine, or as needed. I think what we'd all be quite keen to make sure is that we're full, that we have that discussion on what the plans are, especially if there's any redesign or changes to service collection or service to residents. I said we'd be gentle with you relatively on your first meeting. Thank you for that. There's only 2 items left. I feel quite, let down that you're leaving now. But thank you very much, and please feel free to stay. Richard, Pam, same thing for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Have a good evening.
Eyes down for the last 2 items. So the first one we'll be looking at is the work programme for the rest of 25-26. I had one question that Grays Farm seems to have now dropped off the list entirely. Unless I'm reading the plan wrong or it's gone to another committee. No, I'm just looking at the report. Because I think it was meant to be this meeting, then it got moved.
And
I think it's just not been added back in.
We haven't obviously, sorry, Chair, we haven't put it onto the forward plan, so we'll put that onto the forward plan and let you know when that is. Chair, apologies for that.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on the forward work programme? Obviously, we're about to enter the busy season as we exit autumn, or enter autumn rather. Okay, moving on. The final item is the action tracker. Any comment? Anything to add, comment, or... Oh, it's only a couple of pages. Anything to add to that? Nope. Cool. Right. That's it. Thank you very much. Don't think there's anything else. Nothing urgent item to discuss. Meeting closed at 8:16.